Okay, good morning everybody. So please turn to page Pei Ches. We started the 12th mimer, and basically we spoke about this notion that it seems that everybody has a godly soul and an animal soul, but why is it that the animal soul comes first? Right? Even though the godly soul is the main Iker Chayas, it's the real life force of the person. Hashem blew the soul into our nose, and this represents the godly soul being put into the body. That's what enlivens us. However, we find that the sin crouches at the door, we said. As soon as you come out, first thing you do is you encounter your Nefesh Bahamis, your Yetzer Hara, for 13 whole years before you even really meet your godly soul. And we said that this is the inyan of the klippa precedes the fruit, right? You find also just in stam fruits that before the fruit is actually developed, the whole klippa develops first. And we said it goes in a walnut. There's 4 levels of klippa that come out before you even have the fruit. And essentially, this is the seder of inyanim. It's like that in the world. It's like that inside of us. So we're wondering why it's like that. And as we're discussing this, we say that there's a feeling on the standpoint of the klippas that they themselves feel themselves to be the iker. In other words, they come out first. The Yetzer Hara is called a melech zaken v'kasil. It's called he calls himself a king, true, a foolish king, but an old king. Why is he called an old king? Because he comes first. For 13 years, he has total domination over your entire self, and only then comes the godly soul. And then we'll take it in from inside. Page Pei Ches, second paragraph down, at the very end of the line, about 6 lines down from the top, it says Ukamo Kain. You see that? Everyone sees that? Yes? No?
Yeah.
Ukamo Kain b'ashpas ha'seichel. So this same setup works when it comes to giving over thoughts, intellect. Tchila omrim hamashalim v'atzas devarim. The first thing you do when you try and explain something to somebody is you give over the mashal, right? You don't just tell them exactly what the idea is. You first cloak the idea and say, well, I'm really trying to tell you something, but I'm going to hold off on telling you what it is. I'm going to start talking about fruits, right? And I'm going to start talking about the Yetzer Hara. Here we're trying to talk about something in the Rumo Shel Olam. We're talking about the Yichud of Havayit Elokim, but we don't come out with that. First thing we say is, let me tell you about how fruits are grown. So the same thing works when you try and give over an idea. You start with the externalities. She'ein zeh ha'ikr. The mashal is not the main thing. This is just like we said regarding the chaff and the husks, that they grow before the wheat. And only then you give them the wheat. You bring down the main idea. Which means what you're really going for only comes at the end. And why is that? Because that's how things are in their ultimate source. That's how the way it all rolls out from above. We're just a mirror of how things take place above. The tohu kodem l'tikkun. And what does that mean? That the world of tohu comes before tikkun. We had this whole conversation about 4 or 5 maimarim ago about Esav being the bechor. Esav comes out before Yaakov. Tohu, the world of tohu, which seemingly is not the iker, it's not the purpose of creation. The world was not created for confusion and chaos, and yet that was created first. Even though the real purpose of everything is to get to a world of tikkun, to get to a world where the spheros could contain themselves inside of vessels and create a seeming whole and oneness of a world. As it says, the world was not created for tohu, but rather to be settled. It was formed for it to be settled. But kamaimer, as it says in the Zohar, dina hanile, din lo hanile. Right? It says these, when Hashem created the world of tohu, He says these I don't want. Right? These spheres of tikkun I do want. These spheres of tohu I don't want them. And yet they came first. That's Breshis Rabbah. The Kamosha Kasu v'oav as Yaakov, right? As it says that Hashem really loves Yaakov, not Esav. The Kodem Machshava, the Yaakov al-Bechor be'emes. And not only that, he loves it, but really, going back to those Maimar that we said about Yaakov and Esav, is that really, Yaakov, even when he comes out second, he really came first in thought. That he really truly was the Bechor. How did it work, sort of naturally speaking? Is that when they had relations, the first strength, of Yitzchak went and created Yaakov, the seed of Yaakov. The second strength of Yitzchak created the seed of Esav. Like it says, like if you put two pebbles inside of a closed, metal pipe, the first one that goes in is the last one that comes out. So really, he's the last one to come out, but he's the first one in thought. And the intention was really Yaakov. Why does he come out last? And even though it's really the first in intention, the Tohu comes before the Tikkun. The same is true when it comes to bringing into the existence of the world. That the Hashem creates and forms the klippas before he creates and forms the fruits. That's what we're saying. Like the things in the world are just a mirror image of how they're spiritual sources. In other words, so I get that it all makes sense that we're mirroring the Tohu and Tikkun version, but why did it have to be like that? What's the cause that Hashem felt that he had to make the klippas before the fruits? So this is kind of a deep thing. That if he would have made the fruit first, he could have made the fruit first, just bring out the fruit. He would not then have been able, there would have been sort of a limitation, if you will. Strange that Hashem has limitations, but it looks like there is a limitation, that he would not have been able to then bring out the klippa at all. If the fruits came first, there would be no chance for klippas. And what is our whole line of reasoning in the whole mimer we're holding right now? Is the yichud of the Shem Havai and the Shem Elokim, which is trying to come to explain to us that the Shem Elokim, not only, which is the source of the klippas, not only is it not really conceal the Shem Havaya, although it looks like when it comes out that it's this cloak which shields and hides godliness in the Shem Havaya, it looks like godliness is now hidden inside of nature. The Yetzer Tov is hidden inside of the Yetzer Hara. So we said, in two ways, it's not true. Not only does it not hide the Shem Havaya, why? Because in fact, all it is a way for the Shem Havaya to come out and express itself in a lower form. If it wasn't for the Shem Elokim, the Shem Havaya would not be able to find itself in lower realms of reality. And two, and before we get to two, that's the idea of the mashal, that a teacher gives over a mashal, and in doing so, what he has to hide all the deeper inner meaning of the way he knows the idea, in order so that he can explain it to the student. Hashem is not really, or the teacher is not really hiding when he does that. His intention is not to take away light from the student. His intention is to give something to the student. Ultimately, even all the light to the student. It's just the only way he can do it is by encloaking it inside of a mashal. So that's like the Shem Elokim. It's not a concealment. In fact, it's a revelation. It's just that the only way to get the revelation down to the level of the student is to conceal it to some degree. That's that's one. And why Elokim is not really a concealment. And two, because ultimately, through dealing with the Shem Elokim dafka, through wrestling through the darkness and trying to find your way back to the light, you wind up having a ray of Havaya which is even higher than the original. That you get a greater light from dealing with the darkness than you would have if you just had the straight Havaya itself. So we're holding by the place that the klippa, or the Shem Elokim in this, is something very, very, very valuable. And what he's trying to say is that if Hashem didn't make it in such a way that the klippa came before the fruit, you would never have been able to have the klippa at all. The Shem Elokim couldn't have come second. And why is that?
Rabbi, question.
Yeah, go ahead.
God could do anything. Why didn't he just, make it in a way that the fruits came first, but then there was klippas?
So he's going to explain why. That's the exact question that we're asking. It couldn't be like that. And even though God can do anything, there's a certain... It's like saying Kol b'yidei shamayim chutz miyira shamayim. There are certain things which is called the avodas al tachton, that Hashem makes it as though keilu he can't do. And, right? In other words, Hashem can't make you serve him. He could, but he doesn't get what he wants if he makes you serve him. That's what's called angels, right? So the fact that Hashem leaves room for free choice, it's because He wants you to contribute something to the thing. If He does that for you, He doesn't get what He wants. So there's a limitation, so to speak. It's not really a limitation because He can do whatever, He can make you serve Him, but He doesn't get the actual desire. So Hashem, the whole system is set up in such a way that there are like hang-ups, because it's according to His divine plan. If He really wants what He wants, which is for you, let's say I'm just using a mushal, for you to make a free choice, then He actually has to hold back His powers and limit Himself. So that's a real emesdika limitation, you could say, in Hashem, that He imposes upon Himself for the sake of getting what He wants. It's a similar thing here. If He would have made the fruits come out first, He could not have made the vessel around it. And this is what we're saying. That if it was that lo efshar liyos klal hisavos klipa, there could not be the existence of klipa if the light came first, if the fruit came first. Uma kol shekain, 3 lines from the bottom. Shelo haya efshar liyos shialbish esapri. So he's saying like this: if the light came out first, you would never even be able to have had the shell, and how much more so that even if you could pop out a shell somewhere, the shell would not be able to wrap itself around and contain and hold back the light. Even if you want to say that he could have found some metzias of a klippa, it would not be able to find its way around the fruit and block the fruit from expressing itself and sort of dress it. And therefore, it had to be that if he wanted there to be a klippa at all, and certainly if he wanted that klippa to be able to surround in every capacity the fruit so that it's what you see and you don't see the fruit is hidden inside, it had to be that the klippa came first, the shell came first. Yitzchak, you got to come earlier so you can find a place at the table. You can't ask your difficult questions from so far away. You're going to feel embarrassed. And the example of this, now this is deep stuff. Usually the example is like a mashal about fruits and shells. Here, the mashal that we're to explain fruits is from the Eitz Chaim. It's from Kabbalah. This is what it says in the Eitz Chaim be'inyan oros v'keli regarding light and vessels. The Hiksha, the Arizal has like a good question. This question is brought in many places in Chassidus, which is Lama etzrich lios hatzimtzum. Why did tzimtzum have to be she's alim ha'or lagamre? Right? Why did Hashem have to make it? When He made a tzimtzum of the light, He had to remove the light entirely from that empty space, right? Because let's just rehearse the story. Hashem wants to create a vacuum, a makom panoi, a halal, empty of light. So He removes the Or Ein Sof from some kind of a space that He's going to make there. And then what does He do? He brings back into that space a small ray of light called the kav. So if ultimately what Hashem wanted to do was have a space empty except for a kav, which is what He winds up with, then why doesn't He just remove 99% of the light to begin with and leave 1% in there? And thus would leave Him a kav of light. What's the chachma behind removing 100% of the light and then bringing back 1% of the light? Why does He have to go through this hoops? Like you said, Tzemach, God can do anything. If His ultimate goal is to create a space that has one little sliver of light, then remove 99% and you'll have one sliver of light. Why was that an impossibility for Hashem to remove 100% and then bring back 1%?
In order to expose the killing.
That's right. And that's what we're saying right now. Right? So that we'll explain inside. That He had to remove the light entirely. V'yizgala metzius akli. That's what he says. That's exactly what you just meant. He had to reveal the existence of the vessel, right? And only after He revealed the existence of the vessel, by removing all the light, as we'll explain, then He could come back and bring back a ray of the Or Ein Sof. And the question is, why didn't He originally reveal the light of the kav? So in there, why didn't He leave the light of the kav in here? So the main thing we understand is like this, before we go on, is that the purpose of removing the light, we know, is to reveal the source of the vessels, right? The empty space is going to wind up being the source of Hashem's vessels. The light is the light. So in order to make the source of the vessels come out, He had to remove the light. But still we don't understand why He had to remove all the light. He could have still made the source of the vessel by removing just 99% of the light. And the answer is the imaya or techila, that no. If the light was there to begin with, lo ayav shar liosis havas hakelim. If he would have remained even 1% of that light, because that light is the light of the Or Ein Sof. So who cares if you have 99%, if you have 1%? It's Or Ein Sof. The quality of the light itself makes it so that the existence, the metzias of that empty space could not have actually surfaced. If it's empty, it means it's completely vacant of light. If there's 1% of light there, then the surfacing of this source of the vessels could never have happened.
The Ari says, Aleph, Ashva Aleph, meaning every point or pixel in this Or Ein Sof equal every other point that equal the Or Ein Sof itself, meaning you cannot leave anything.
You can't leave anything. Aval, however, but once he removed every single piece of the light and it's empty, and now the source of the vessels is now firm, they do not get nullified by bringing the light of the kav back.
And then this kav, it's not the same thing. It's not the same 1% as before.
It is and it isn't. In other words, there is something of the Or Ein Sof that does not actually return.
Which is?
Which is a certain. There's two aspects of the Or Ein Sof.
Last time we said that there was light and darkness, and it was just mixed together. He removed everything, and then he just brought the darkness back. Is that it?
Not exactly. Oh, well, hold on. Light and darkness, meaning to say the darkness there was light.
The darkness, yeah.
Yes, so that's exactly right. So in the Or Ein Sof, there's two parts.
Yeah.
There's the Or Ein Sof called light, and there's the Or Ein Sof, which is the source of Mamali and Sovev inside the Or Ein Sof, which is called darkness. So when all the light is there, those two levels are shining. Both light and darkness are shining in that space. When he makes the tzimtzum, the only thing that comes back is the darkness light. And that's why the vessels can handle it.
And that's the kav.
That's the kav. Right?
If there was any of it, it would. If there's any of the Or Ein Sof, that would be it. It would be back to.
It seems that ultimately, eventually, even the light part of the Or Ein Sof can also and will also return into that thing. It didn't right away. But, so that remains like a super makif but the point is like this: once you make the vessel solid, which means you take all the light away and the vessel sort of materializes, it gets formed. It's like, you know how you could almost look at it is like we said our classic mashal of the calcium deposits inside of the kumkum, right? The hot water urn. So at first you have all the water. There's no rocks in the water. It's just water. When you burn all the water away, you wind up with rocks all in the bottom of your hot water urn, right? Then even if you pour, and this, unfortunately, you try and clean the thing out, you can't get those rocks out of there ever. Even if you pour all the scalding hot water back in there, right, it won't get rid of those rocks. Even if you put even hotter water in there, once they're there, they're not going anywhere. And that's the idea that, now, the truth is not all the water came back. Not all the Or Ein Sof did come back right away. But ultimately it will, right? Only the dark part of the Or Ein Sof came back. But so when Mashiach comes and like all the lights come on, we will experience the entirety of the Or Ein Sof, and the vessel will still not disappear. Okay, but where are we getting? You want to ask a question?
Where does it go?
It goes into Hashem's own essence. Because remember, the light to begin with is not Him. It's just His name. It's something He's shining. It's a ray of Him. So the fact that it's shining to begin with, what you're seeing is called the Or Ein Sof. That's called the light of the Ein Sof. That means the Ein Sof is one thing and the light of the Ein Sof is another thing. So this is what's filling the space is only the light of the Ein Sof. So when he removes it, in fact, what he's actually revealing, which is no light, is actually his Ein Sof self. The source of the vessels come from a higher place. They come from the Ein Sof. And this that you don't see light and you see nothing, what you're really seeing is what's beyond light. And suddenly that's the source of the vessels. You get that?
Yeah.
The point we're getting at here, though, is very important for our fruit and shell analogy. Which is that bedugma kazos yeshlum b'inyan zeh. Just like this whole concept of the Arizal, it's funny that we're using like a Kabbalah as the mashal. We can now understand fruits on a tree. She'ima yatechili his galus apri. That if first Hashem created a fruit, it just came out like the pure apple with no skin. Lo ayav sharliosis havos a klippa. You'd never get a skin around there, right? The vessels would never be able to surface if the light didn't go away. And Bechlal, forget about surfacing, they for sure wouldn't be able to wrap themselves around the apple so that you can't see the apple anymore. The only way to get these vessels to come out in such a way that the light is now going to be fit inside of them as opposed to negating them altogether is if you remove the light entirely and you let that shell sit there all by itself. Now the shell has a place by itself. It feels its Messiah is very strong. Then even when the light comes back, the light is now fitting itself into the parameters of the shell, not the other way around. So now the light, it can only expand itself as much as the shell will allow. Because the shell was given precedence and a preference to sort of rule, to lead the dance. Therefore, there needs to be first the klippa and afterwards the fruit. And this is mamish why your nefesh Bahamas comes before your nefesh Elokis. There's a reason why for 13 years you're just one big klippa, right? It's because if you just came out first, right off the guns, nefesh Elokis, there would be no possibility to make a nefesh Bahamas fit for you. You would have no Yetzer Hara. If Hashem created just a godly soul, it would be perfect. It would be like a malach. You would never be able to sort of wrap it into something and give it a free choice. The only way to create the inyan of avodas Hashem is to start off with emptiness of light and vessels and klippas, and then plug and inject the light into there. Then the whole process can advance. It's interesting, no?
The Nefesh Bahamas is enclothing the Nefesh Kiss.
Yes, it's
all
all wrapped around
in
it.
the Nefesh Bahamas.
The Nefesh Elokis is inside of
What?
the Nefesh Bahamas. Sure. Where do you think it is?
This is in the brain. This is in the heart. This is in the left ventricle. This is in the right ventricle.
Every aspect of you, basically. It's like, look at the way the Arizal explains it,
On your chapter
or the Rabbi Chaim Vital. Yeah, he does quote the Otzros Chaim over there, I think, and he says that you have it's like Russian dolls. First, you have your goof. And goof is just a physical thing. It's not even a soul at all. It's almost just like material. And then that inside of that is placed your nefesh Bahamas, right? So the body, like for example, a non-Jew, that's where it ends. You know what I'm saying? You have soul and body. The body is the kli for the soul. And then when it comes to a yid, inside of that, then the nefesh Bahamas comes the kli and the body for the nefesh Elokis. So every single aspect of your entire divine experience, it's automatically facing a challenge before it can even ever surface. If it wants to come out, it has to conquer the small city, like it says in the Tanya.
It says that it's in two different books. In Tanya, it says one's in the mind, one's in the heart.
But even in the mind, it's Iker Moshav. It's mainly where it sits. But your mind also has something called a nefesh hasichlis. You have an intellectual mind of what's called seichel lanushe, like the mind of a human being. And the natural soul, and for you to have godly thoughts, you never, at least when you're enclosed in your goof, you never have godly thoughts which are not automatically shaped and structured inside of some kind of a natural object. It's like right now we're trying to understand something very deep. We're talking about fruits. Even if we want to talk about lights and vessels, it's like a physical muscle. Your brain cannot think about pure godliness without first contriving it inside of some natural format, and that's because it's like your soul. Your soul can't pick up a cup unless your hand picks up a cup. It's enclosed from every single angle around your. It's just that there's certain places where it's easier for it to operate than others. Like in your heart, there's a much thicker, coarse feeling of yesh, so that it won't even ever surface unless you give a strong pulse from your brain to allow it to sort of break into the realm of the heart. But in general, there's not one move that you make which you don't bring your nefesh Bahamas with you, because it surrounds in every way your godly soul. So since the nefesh Bahamas, its claims come first. That's what. In other words, it came first into the body, and therefore it sort of sets the rules before the nefesh Elokis even has a word. Now here comes Johnny come lately. The godly soul comes and reveals itself after 13 years. It doesn't just come out fighting like an even battle. It comes out, like we just said, enclosed in every possible angle inside of the animal soul. Which means that l'chatchila, the animal soul is totally concealing and covering it over. Now going back to our original question of the mimer, we said why is the Seder in such a way that you have to subtract and then add and then dorish. So for those who just came, let's remind ourselves what this means. That when it comes to making what's called the Nasira, which is the removal of Adam from Chava, and taking them out of having a back-to-back relationship where they're stuck to each other's back, which we said is like basically a contraction of the godly light, to turning them around to having a front-to-front relationship, which means that the true godliness can sort of be seen. This first requires a separation, a havdalah and then a hamtaka, a separation and then a sweetening. And so we said the process of this separation and sweetening can be seen in the Torah, since everything first is found in the Torah, from the principle called Gorin Mosifun of Vidorshin. That there's this idea that you could take one letter, if you have a pasuk, you could take a letter off of one word, add it to another word, and then reinterpret the whole sentence in this new way. It's like a principle of Torah learning. And we said, how does this apply to our lives? Because this is the idea of taking energy away from the animal soul, adding it to the godly soul, and then sort of, that's called the separation. And then the sweetening is the new level of divine light that is a result of that. That's called dorshin. You can seek me with all your heart now. So based on that, we had a question. Why, if Hashem made the man upright, man is created basically in the image of God, and l'chatchila we tell him that your mode of avoda has to be pulling energy out of your animal soul and then giving it to your godly soul, and then you can serve me. We say, wait a minute, you made a man upright. Why can't he just start l'chatchila serving you with his godly soul? You know, not everyone is a Baal Tshuva, not everyone fails, that they're expending all their energy into negative physical things, in which they then have to pull them out and start serving you. Maybe he's just a good guy. In other words, he starts off an upright man. Why l'chatchila, the say the Torah established for every single person, even if he's a tzaddik, is in such a way that you have to first remove something from the negative side, and only then add to the positive side, like sur me'irav, then aseh tov. So now we understand. Because basically everybody, no matter who you are, your klippah preceded your fruit. It's just like the way man was made, is that no matter who you are, even if you're a tzaddik gamur, you're born into a goof. You're born in the tzimtzum was total. And even a tzaddik gamur, for the first 13 years of his life, he doesn't have a godly soul in a revealed way.
So that's why first it had to be separated, it had to be removed from him.
Therefore, you have to remove from the negative and then add in the positive, no matter what road you're going to take when it comes to serving God.
How do you apply this to the soul and the animal, the godly soul and the animal soul?
We said many times, you have to take away your interest in physicality and then increase with that new energy your interest in avodas Hashem, right? And that's called the separation. You're pulling, right? What's the idea of the separation in the initial mushal, which we say pretty much every class? What does it mean, a back-to-back relationship? That the teacher has to come down into the parameters of the student and teach him a mushal in order for the student to understand. And what that winds up doing is hiding the greatness of the teacher so that he looks like he's at the same level as the student, right? That they kosel echad l'shneim. They both have one wall. It says when they're back to back, they have one wall, the back. And the idea of having one wall is that you can't tell the heightened, elevated level of the teacher because he's cloaked himself inside of a mushal, which the student understands just as much as the teacher, right? So that's called mixing the good into the evil. You have to pull them apart, right? You have to, and separate them to make it clear that there's such a thing really as good and bad, that there's such a thing as high and low. Because as it is, the high is hiding inside the low. Same thing is true with your godly soul. There's a part of you which is mamash achelek elokai mimal mamish, and it has nothing to do with physicality in this world. It's like a mishkan of the Eibishter. But what? It comes out being like stuffed inside of little potato, right? Which is you. And so you have to pull it out. You have to drag it out in order to even be in a position where you can begin to serve Hashem and utilize the true power of your soul to serve God in this world. Because as it is, the true power of your soul is negated and stuffed out inside of it coming down to fit into your body. So that's called the separation. And therefore the first thing you do is you have to pull yourself away from bodily things. Negate the body, and then take with that energy that you would have been expending into what your body wants to do, you now have an extra energy to expend in what your soul wants to do. And this is called the teacher sort of showing himself to the student. And what is it in the analogy? He starts to explain to the student, I don't just know this mushal. I know the whole depth of what this mushal means, and I'm going to start showing you who I really am. And that's like adding the light into your avodas Hashem.
I thought that this whole procedure of removing, adding, and then darshaning was with the soul itself. Like first the Jew, there was a godly soul up in the heaven, and then it had to be removed, and the animal soul is there. And then at the age of 13,
No, I don't. You're making this up. This is not what we're saying. It's the idea of you start off with a animal soul, you plug a Jew into it, and then they have to be removed. And the removal is that because the godly soul was hiding and condensed inside of the animal soul. That's like the idea of a teacher giving himself over in just a mushal. God has to come down so low that as far as the animal soul is concerned, it looks like the godly life force that's inside of him is at the same plane as his own human life force. And that's like a total ridiculous concept. But Hashem does that favor for us so he can at least find himself placed inside of the animal soul to begin with. If he didn't allow that huge contraction to happen, and he just let the godly soul fly, there would have been no way to ever put it inside of an animal soul. It wouldn't have fit in there.
Guys, class is not over yet. Just let you know.
Whoa. Yeah. You with me?
Yeah.
Okay. Shimon, we usually put on tefillin after Chassidus class. But I mean, there's reason, makdim in the mitzvahs. Okay. So anyway, everyone following? Yeah. That was like a big summary of the whole thing. So going down 3 lines into the second paragraph. V'hine nizbar la'el. We explained earlier the gorin hu lasir chumrius ha'av. Then what's the idea of gorin, the whole idea of subtracting? This is in order to remove the thick coarseness of a person's conduct, right? Like it says, you have to forget your people, forget your father's house, like you have to go out of your accustomed behaviors that you picked up before you got to yeshiva. Which means like just the corporality that you're accustomed to from your upbringing. Before you remove this, before you make this big separation on yourself, everybody has to be a Baal Tshuva. It doesn't matter if you grow up the firmest guy. You grow up being coddled and being spoiled and taking, going in your animalistic way. 13 years, you don't even have a choice in the matter. You're only the best your parents can do is sort of train you like you train a dog, right? You can make a dog do sit, stand, paw, jump, spin, but it's still a dog. And it still just wants doggy things, right? So it has a certain custom from its youth to be a selfish entity. You can't get out of it, no matter how well you're trained. And so the first thing you have to do is, before you remove you make this hasara, this removal. Before it's done, the animal soul is totally sunk inside of and hidden inside of the nefesh bahamas. The Rasha machtir tzaddik, as it says, the Rasha surrounds the tzaddik. Keser is like lashon, like a circle or surrounding you. The tzaddik is surrounded on all sides. It's like the state of the world. It says that we're like a sheep surrounded by 70 wolves. Right? The Jewish people are the same thing. We're like the godly soul of the world. And we came late into the world. The world existed for 2,000 years before Avram Avinu shined into the world. Forget 13 years. 2,000 years the world got accustomed to being a world. And we're surrounded by the Rasha. And at that state, it's not felt or experienced bechlal any feeling of godliness. Because that's the point. Hashem makes a mashal. And he totally conceals all that makes him greater than the world. His mashal is him coming down and showing how he can enliven himself with the state of the world. He does purposely removing all experience which is beyond the world. He does it to give the world existence. Again, if he would have maintained some aspect of beyond the world and tried to make a world at the same time, the world would never have appeared. So he literally has to remove every shred of evidence that there's some God beyond the world in order to make the world feel comfortable being a world. So now he's totally hidden inside of there. There's not a feeling at all that there's something beyond the world, that there's a godly soul. When it comes down to it, the godly soul is essentially a vessel which can hold godliness. In other words, it's tailor-made to be something which can maintain inside of it something which is beyond the world. Right? The Nefesh HaBahamis comes to the Shem Elokim. The Nefesh Elokis comes to the Shem Havaya, which means theoretically the Shem Havaya is beyond Teva. The godly soul is a natural entity which can hold inside of it something which is beyond Teva. Therefore the souls are called the throne for God. Like he can sit on us. As it says, he exists and his name exists and his throne, which is us, is proper. It's set up to hold him and his name. And this idea of his throne refers to the souls which are called his throne. The why are we called a throne? Because we actually can hold God. The soul is able to maintain inside of it supernatural energy of divine source, which is not worldly. That when a godly soul occupies himself in trying to understand and comprehend godliness, it's like he gets it. When you teach a Yid Kabbalah, it's like he knew it all of his life. Right? You have this experience. I'm sure it happened to every single one of you. You're like, that's exactly what I thought I knew already. Whereas the truth is that I told you, I've had this experience many times. When you try to teach, let's say, a non-Jew these types of topics, you don't get that same response. And I don't mean to be racist or anything. Try it at home. Right? It's just like, they think you're like talking Chinese. It's like, what are you talking about? Like, explain that again. Whereas usually, when you start talking about Havai and Elokim, and there's something beyond the world and it's alive in the world, for a Yid, it's like music to his ears. He's like, yes, that's exactly what I thought was going on. It just settles nicely in his soul. He's like, he holds that well, that information. And the godly light all shines up through his soul. It's a kli for it. He gets excited about it. That's what it means to be a kli for something. It moves you. You internalize it. About kol zman, kol zehu kashan nefesh elokis hu bis galus. But that's only true if the godly soul is a little bit on the surface. It could be that you try to explain this to a Yid also. He doesn't want to talk to you and has no time for this. And he's like, go get a job. Because that's all the while where the nefesh elokis is somewhat protruding and the ears are open. Not so when it's totally enveloped inside of the nefesh habahamis. Then the soul is a kli for the Eibusher, but the kli is concealed. You can't get to that kli. Right? Einu meir bo ha'or eloki. You can't shine into it the godly soul, the godly light. As it says, Ki avanoseichem hayu mavdilim beinu u'beinechem, that your sins separate you from me. As it says in Yigeros HaKodesh, Perek Hey, that nothing can block out Hashem. Like you said before, Hashem has no limitations. Hashem is on one side of the wall, and you're on the other side of the wall. Hashem is also on that side of the wall. Nothing can stop him. Except for your sins. Why? Because he makes it in such a way that if you're going to block him out, he allows himself to get blocked out. He says, I and you cannot dwell in the same place. If you want to dwell there, you're all by yourself, buddy. If you don't make room for me, you got it. I'm not there. And why? Because the sins are against the will of Hashem. So he makes a system where he only allows himself to be in a place where his will is fulfilled. If you don't fulfill his will, then all you get is the mashal, the Shem Elokim. You don't get the godliness in that place. Therefore, the first thing one must do is to remove the coarse outer covering. And this is just get up and do it, right? Nice of a nishma. Like you tell a yid, you're busy arguing with him and he's like, you're not getting anywhere. He says, look, put on tefillin. Maybe Shimon has a good call there. Put on tefillin, and then we'll talk. You know? Because the whole idea of him sort of being why would I put on tefillin? What is the Rabbi up to when he says go out in the street, just put a tefillin on people? And so many people argue, well, not anymore. But they used to argue and say, what are you doing? Like, come on, this is like some vain attempt of like trying to be spiritual and do something for God. Like, what are you accomplishing with one little pair of tefillin? It's huge what you're accomplishing. Because the moment this guy is wrapping himself in tefillin, what's he doing other than the Ratzon Elyon? There's no sane reason, rational reason for this. And his whole being is all of a sudden conforming to the Ratzon Elyon with what's called kafiyah b'poel. You have to overcome your animalistic tendencies with just forcing your goof to do what God wants. And all of a sudden you make a kli for Elokus. All of a sudden he will come to the Chabad house. How is it possible that, how many stories have you heard? That, hey, how'd you wind up in yeshiva? Well, I was at the wall on some conservative group and some guy put the tefillin on me and I don't know, it all sort of started from there. How many, I've heard that story 100 times. That's you. It happened to me also. What is it that the tefillin does at the wall there? It's not right? It's all of a sudden the guy conformed basically without knowing it. Like the Rebbe tricked him into it. Yeah, just come on, it's fun, it's Jewish. And all of a sudden his whole being became a kli for the Ratzon Elyon, and all of a sudden his mind is now open. He let his godly soul shine. He's now a kli for Hasaga and Havana and Elokus. In order to allow the godly soul at least a little bit to come out. Because you can't do a mitzvah and not have your godly soul a little bit come out. Because the one doing the mitzvah at the end of the day is the godly soul. Boom, he's there. So once he's there, he's a kli for the Eibishter as well. And then you can shine the godliness into that kli that you made, al yedei hasaga. The understanding of God now has a place to go. But first you have to remove that coarse outer shell. Just blocking it, your sins won't let it in. In order to bring forth the godly soul. Okay, then Mosifi. You did it, now you have to actually add energy into the godly part. First you have to remove, then you have to truly, that's not enough. You have to do avoda from the standpoint of your actual godly soul. Your godly soul has to get organized and motivated and generate its own service. And he says when it comes, the same is true in the animal soul itself. That it first must be broken and remove the coarse outer shell in order that there's a possibility for it to be fixed. So long as you keep your real arrogant stance and you sort of won't let it in, then you cannot really start to soften it up and work with it. It's like a person who's basically, he wants to, he's overweight, he's obese, and he wants to take care of himself, unless he really breaks himself. And he says all right, I'm not buying donuts anymore. It's not happening. That's like breaking the harsh klippas. Then he's already becomes shaykh to sort of going on his workout. There's the idea of sur meirav v'aseh tov. You can't really get anywhere with your fixing of yourself if you don't first pull away from the negative behaviors. Because why? It's not like you can't just go ahead and jump into the positive behaviors. It's just that you won't. Because you're sort of laying around in your taivas keeps you from having any interest in doing the right thing. So the first stage is always making that cut, that circumcision. Because he's not touched by the interest in working out when he's surrounded by his taivas. It doesn't speak to him. It's like, well, yeah, I'll go to the base medrash, but I'm like, this is the best part of the movie, right? So I don't want to go to the base medrash right now. It's not like he can't. He has the power to overcome anything. It's just that he doesn't want to. It doesn't speak to him to start doing avoda unless he first pulls himself out and gets sort of disgusted with his taivas. Ve'ina or the nefesh eloki poil bo abitul. The godly soul does not affect a bittul in the animal soul. Im lo be'inyan hatshuva. Okay, now he gives one yotzi min haklal, one exception for that. One thing which can break the whole system is tshuva. In other words, it could be that your mom is sitting in a place. We sometimes get guys over here that, we had a guy a few years ago. His mom is like a hardcore drug addict. In heroin and everything. He was living in some crazy place, just lost. And like out of thin air, he just like did tshuva. He couldn't stand it anymore. Where did that come from? He didn't decide he doesn't want this anymore. He didn't start cutting off his negative behaviors. He didn't follow the program. He just did tshuva, like his soul like screamed out. And what's that? There is one way to sort of circumvent this whole scenario, which is that there could be an overpowering of your godly soul. You can't really wait for this to happen, but it could happen that your godly soul just like pushes out.
Wow.
And this is called the Hisgalus Yesera from the Nefesh Elokis. Harizeh poel gam shenefesh habahamis betokef. This can affect the animal soul even when it's in its full strength. And you find basically, in Yidden as well, there's certain Yidden that, they could be fully, sunk into the animalistic world, and they're married to a non-Jew, and they don't want anything to do with it. All of a sudden, like a moment comes up, and like they just throw it all off for a second, and they like something happens, the pintele Yid, and they just come out of themselves, even when their animal soul is in full tokef, in full strength. But that's an exception to the rule. When it comes to generally speaking, that you're a person who wants to do avoda, and you're not waiting for a miracle to happen, which is called the avoda of tam v'das. You have to work rationally and in sync. You cannot do that when your animal soul is full blazing, right? And as we see also, guys, let's say they take a little vacation from yeshiva, they go back home. They get all wrapped up and involved in their friends again and their parties, and they forget all about it. Next Zman, when it starts again, I'll remember I'm a yeshiva bacher. Guess what happens? When they come back, it takes them a long time to remember they're yeshiva bacher. Because they're all wrapped up in it still. And when the animal soul is full on betokef, you can't do any avoda. You just lie in bed all day. And give excuses. Okay, we have to hold here. Someone can press stop on that thing?